Welcome to the Climate Hive show. What do you solve? Where we sit down with global game changers on climate. My name is Kevin Drolet, aka Kedro, and I'm here with my partner in podcast, Mike Higgins, aka Higo. Food waste is a massive and solvable issue for climate. Globally, roughly 30% of all food produced is lost or wasted somewhere between the farm and our plates. And often we think of food waste as leftovers or spoiled groceries, but much of the problem starts much earlier with inaccurate forecasting. Kitchens simply don't know exactly how much food people will eat, what they'll choose, or how quality changes throughout service. And the result is food wasted, money wasted, and unnecessary carbon emissions. So our guest today is solving that, and he believes that before you can fix waste, you have to measure it and accurately, automatically, without creating more work for an already busy kitchen staff. So joining us is Fengmin Gong, serial entrepreneur and CEO of Metafoodx. His team has built an AI-powered platform that combines computer vision, IoT sensors, and machine learning to recognize food, measure proportions, record temperatures, and generate real-time operational insights. We're going to learn all about it, and this is a super important issue to us in the show, and we want to continue to delve into this. So we're very excited to talk to Fengmin, and I'm going to turn it over to my good man Higo to kick us off. Fengmin, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. It's my great pleasure to be here with you, Kevin and Mike.
All right, Feng, good morning. So my first question is the name of our show, and we'll get this party rolling. So Fengmin, what do you solve?
You mean for us, do we solve? It's a great question, right? For us, overall, it's solving the sustainability problem for our food system, right? That's our big goal. But we have to start with a real problem, have real impact. And that's where we says consumption-based, data-driven planning, production is the key. So we want to offer this tool to have the operators to really improve, take away the heavy lifting, improve their accuracy for planning, and increase their efficiency. So that's how we focus our effort.
When we talk about 30% reduction, we're talking about 30% before the food is delivered, right? Versus 30% food waste coming back on plates from stuff that people didn't eat. Where are you focused?
Very good question. We focus on the tough part where the food get prepped in the back kitchen, right? Where all the tough in the heat work, and then all the way to be served on the plates to the consumer. Sometimes we can also track the post-consumer to help them, but the key part is this, is before it gets to delivery, it's about the production. Think about the production, right? From ingredients into the menu items. Right. That is where two interesting things. One is, of course, it's a big part of contribution, right? The other part is how they do in this part actually affect how much the post-consumer actually may leave on the plate, right? Because of the quality, because of the taste. So that's why this is a critical part.
And when you think about the kitchen, right? I have this idea in manufacturing of just in time, right? Just in time components, right? You really can't have just in time in restaurants because food is typically delivered early in the morning, right? To a restaurant, like what's the worst thing that could happen from a food availability perspective? Is it not having what you need when you need it? Is that the big headwind for you guys? Is it people are so ingrained of, I can't be out, so I'm just going to buy a lot? Is that how it works?
And then this is where what it drives a lot of waste, right? Indeed, for food, people's first reaction, in particular, although not every venue, right, is doing like self-serve, right, buffet style, even if for server served, but it's always you would like to make sure all the people come in, enjoys, in particularly the good, right, delicious item they are expecting. So it is that desire, being hospitality, to drive them. You always want to have a small amount of overproduction. And the question is how much, right? And as you said, without accurate data, right, for you to actually do down to the menu level, do careful planning and prediction, and that's where the overproduction is just too much.
I'm just picking up on this thread. The thing that's crazy is that restaurants have such thin margins, and yet 30% is such a massive number in terms of food waste. I don't understand. What is the problem? Like, why is it that restaurants wouldn't figure this out? Do they not have the technology? Is it just that is there habits? And is it that you're changing that's helping to solve this problem? Because I would think that as a restaurant owner, I'd always be looking for how to like shave costs in order to stay
Yeah.
alive.
Very good question. I would say restaurant is going to be slightly different, right, from any institutional dining where you feed a lot of people. You basically do, although you strive for small batch, right? Small batch just in time for the quality but then for the restaurant, although then it depends on, right? Let's just leave the buffet restaurant on the side. We generally talk about the restaurant where you would have, except for some of the quick service ones, right? They would still have the same problem because they do small batch, but they still have this issue. And the ones that are more different is the one made to order, right? If you started going up where from fine dining maybe to some of the casual, right? Restaurant. So this is where for made to order, maybe you are looking at their challenge in terms of overall the food waste, maybe slightly different, depending on how they are doing it. But there where they face the challenge is more different, right? Look at this way. For them, because every order is made on their based on their design portion. Indeed, if they have the right data, they would know if their portion size, right? Today they have a standard portion should be adjusted. So there is a waste coming from there. And then the next big one actually is coming from the inventory. They have a big challenge in managing their inventory for the next day, and how long do they have, right? Half a week, a few days versus a week, 2 weeks. That's where, because they don't have the means of tracking them, how to connect the inventory to exactly what dish goes out, because each dish uses a different set of ingredients, right? So that is one big part, because if they don't manage well, and then that food become not fresh or spoiled, and that's a waste. And then there is another part of it is their back kitchen, how the chef are doing the right trimming and things. Because this is where, again, how they do it, how disciplined, how skilled they are, actually also make a big difference in balancing that and being efficient. So for the restaurant, indeed, you can see they still have the same problem because they don't know what happens exactly more accurately between the ingredients and the dish go out, because they assume a standard portion, but that standard portion is not always right. And every dish coming out on the plate is actually different depending on how the back kitchen is prepping. And today they don't know. They assuming one unit sold is one unit sold, and how much I'm buying in between is a black hole that is contributing to their challenge in terms of margin.
And you think about ingredients in a dish, right? That's exactly right. Because you might have hit it 9 out of 10, but that 10th, you might have completely blown it and bought way too much. Because on your website, metafoodx.com, you have a video of a kitchen worker putting a dish under a camera, right? You have a camera that goes up and is taking a picture, and he talks about it. It's 2 seconds, right? It's a 2 second scan. So what struck me was you're scanning the finished product. This is the assembled dish, right? And it goes in. So tell me what's going on in that 2 second scan and how that backs into, because it has to know all the ingredients and what it's looking at.
And then we do it at two levels. First of all, is that quick 2 seconds, you put it on that platform, it auto sends it. So it know now it kicks in, recognize what it is exactly in
Right.
terms of dish, pick up and what is on the plate. And then it measures the net weight. That is any container it was in, as long as you have registered that container once, it recognizes the container and then it take the net weight of the food. And at that same time, it actually measures the food area, the temperature of the food, right? There is a danger zone, and the food temperature need to be below and above this temperature threshold.
Right.
So those are the fundamental ones. Of course, in addition to that, we depend on the device we deploy. We know exactly where, which location, which workflow stage actually we are looking at this, right? Those are critical ones when you think about in the future automate and reason about it. And one of the things allow us to make that extremely easy, right, for the operator, because you can think of that process anywhere, almost like also a pipeline, right? They do very tight shift. And if they do any of the things manual, they are talking about the minutes, right? People's time versus this. It's just once you insert it into the workflow. And we leverage AI to make one of the things that is actually we be able to track any prepped food, but also from ingredients and then all the way up. And the reason we were able to do that is we are leveraging the AI today, combination of the transformer computer vision, large language model, and everything, the model we build in-house. This is where the system, the AI is smart enough. It's like behaving like a human. It has intuition because by looking at it, both from image and also picking up the ingredient and things, it then put those together to match against the menu you are supposed to be serving. And that's where it able to pick it up without you spending like 20 images to do a pre-training in restaurant. We from day one realize you should not go there. If you go there, the solution is going to be very hard to onboard and people will give up. That's how it happens. And we know that is the first step because now you got all the data. You can make great use of it, right? Get insights, guidance, but getting that data without heavy manual work is the critical step to start.
And maybe that's a great segue because in our previous discussion, your solution you were talking about, we have to make it easy for the humans, which we thought was such a profound way to look at things because people oftentimes come with technology, but really, will the humans use it to solve the problem? And I would love for you to just like talk about that a little bit. How did that evolve or how did that thinking evolve? Because there certainly are some solutions out there for measuring food waste, and you're really trying to take a leap. And also, within this, there's variation. Like you talked about, institutional dining is different than if you're restaurants, for example, or a buffet, or if you're. I was just at Disneyland yesterday with a 7-year-old, and like I was thinking about this show. I was like, wow, there's like this thing about food. Like, how does Disneyland think about all this food people are consuming? There's so much. How much waste is Disneyland? How come back to the question of the humans? How did you land on that? It has to be something that the humans needs to be easy for them.
This is great question. As you guys know, it was doing cybersecurity, right? Starting multiple of the company and Palo Networks, and I'm really proud, right, of the company is doing great. Some of the principle coming actually from cybersecurity. And this is where very early on, as we do this work, in the end, what we realized is if we think about an attack or a threat, right, and there is human involved in the start, and then there is human life impact at the end. If none of those, right, then actually the problem is not worth solving. But then the issue, as you ask that question, is sometimes when people, in particular from a technical background, right, then just focusing on technical aspect of it, then you may try to solve a problem. Either the problem is not such a big pain, or the problem the way you solve it, it may be just for the technologist to appreciate it, but it doesn't get people to be used, right? So this is where we say, okay, the things begin with human and end with human, and then you have to think about that impact. So then if you now look at that into the food service, that's exactly the situation, and probably I would say more personal, right? Because now all of a sudden impact every one of us. And we know, for example, that flavor, right? We have seen so many examples about the food, about pursuing different alternative proteins and so on and so forth, which is great until they can get the problem nailed in terms of the flavor. And that's probably the ultimate. People are trying to be able to do the color, texture, and the flavor is the one that typically turns people off, right? Because you have to eat it, right? There is no line. So this is where, and then of course in the operation, right? If you think of whoever ultimately we have to eat, that's ultimate test, right? You deliver the good quality food and nutritious and so on and so forth. But then all of this, right? From what menu item, it got to be human chef tested flavor. And then you're just talking about the execution, right? How to make it and deliver it. So that process is where we try to apply the technology. And in this process, you cannot assume you are going to have a totally closed loop without a human. It's just not possible if you look at that because of the food, right? It's consumed. So from the chef to everyone on the line on working nutrition all the way to delivery and line cook. That's where we have to be very aware how they do it today, how they do their best practice, right, to deliver. And because they have been working on this for decades and many years. So this is where the technology need to fit their workflow to actually provide them, right, the help and then have the good end results. Those are the two. That's why it's human making it happen, human judging if this is working. That's another way to think about it.
And just to throw in really quick, because I just wanted you to tell one story that I thought was so cool is that your company has actually learned from people in the kitchens, which I think a lot of people bring a solution but don't learn from enough from how those that are doing it every day. And you were telling a story about one particular location where you actually were trying to understand how the kitchen staff was trying to solve the problem of waste, not just coming in and dumping a solution on top of them. But I wonder if you can tell that story if you remember.
Absolutely. And this is actually at a big university, a public university in California. They're good at their practice. And then when we went, actually, I can mention, right, this is UC Riverside, a good focus there. We just go learn early on. We have one form factor is we're going to have vision-based monitored over the sneeze guard, right? To track food being taken away, the consumption. We thought it's great, right? Out of your way, help you with the data and you can optimize. And then we quickly realized those folks have their own good idea where, because some of this, you don't always serve the food in buffet style or server served. They actually can be dynamic and that make a lot of sense for them based on the traffic, based on the particular menu item. So they have a good way of implementing portion control and also making sure, right, all this and minimize the waste. So what they do is based on the item, based on the time of the day, and they can dynamically shift into a mode where menu item, let's say steak, we just take an example, and then they would plate. They would use the labor, the force dynamically. During that time, they switch to plating by the servers. And so then all of a sudden they pull out some board and put over those cold well, hot well, and then start plating, and then the student just took it away. So that is something we didn't anticipate, right? We thought, okay, if we have this sneeze guard mounted one, it's the best to fit their environment. And that lesson from that one was that a big part, we went to this mobile portable scanner. And now all of a sudden, right, we solve everything, both weight and recognition and volume. And this can be deployed anywhere in their workflow, right? You just need a tabletop. That was things that we learned, right? The operators knows their best practice and they are always striving to. And then we just need to provide them the assistance, right, to make it happen.
Those are awesome extensions and how you've learned from that. Did you work in a restaurant when you grew up? I'm still trying to make the connection between chief scientist, cybersecurity, software dev guru to I'm going to go solve food waste.
Right.
Just because they're on such opposite sides of the spectrum.
To be honest, that I of course enjoy food, right? Maybe claim myself says, okay, I'm a foodie. When I was growing up, I would be just around the kitchen when my mom cooks, right? I grew up in the countryside. And then I'm like the default flavoring person in the house, even today. I'll just quickly mention, actually learned from one of my very early boss back in North Carolina, continue to do a special hamburger. The big difference is I actually do the beef and onion, ginger, all those different spicy mix and sesame oil to do it first. Even sometimes learn from a chef who says you should saute those other vegetable related ingredient a little bit before you mix with the beef and then you make the patties. And that continued to be the best food, right? The kids would ask us, okay, can you do barbecue and you make your burger? I've always have this thing about the food, right? Enjoy food and also very conscious about eating healthy. And that combination, always pay attention and always know this thing about people told me, says, okay, friends, open restaurant. It's very hard work, right? Get up very early, very late, and still you barely make it. People make it in those days, right? They don't make it big. So that's where when I first learned about food waste, then it got me thinking deeper. And then that's where I feel, based on where I know the technology is, right, or is going, I feel there is some good solution to be had to actually help. That's what I feel. We definitely have a good technology foundation, if you will, to change that myth. People think food service should always be back-breaking and very low margin. I think we should take some serious steps, become my new passion and mission for the team.
Go ahead, bud.
Oh, well, I was just going to ask, can you talk about how did environment, climate, did that enter the picture? Because we know, for example, Project Drawdown considers reducing food loss and waste as one of the highest impact solutions that you can get, right? And I think the solution will be taken up not by people probably thinking about climate, but probably by people thinking about how you can be more efficient, which is awesome. But for your own development, were you thinking about it? Were you thinking about, hey, this is a problem that needs to be solved, or did it?
It is, tell you a quick story. This is where very early on, about 3 years ago, I was at the Future Food Tech, right, conference in San Jose. I actually went. That's the first one. And I complained to some of the session moderators because I know everyone was focused on alternative proteins. Being in tech, right? I totally understand. But then this is where, because a big driver was about sustainability, about the climate. And my argument was if we look at the food waste, in particular in this food production and consumption stage, this, I argue, is the lowest hanging fruit for dealing with the climate problem. Because we know, right, from farm to table, we throw away about 30% of what we produce. And regardless what protein, right, source you do, which is great work, but mining the consumption demand and basically the demand and supply balance is very critical because otherwise you're going to waste regardless what you have. And the future ones, by all means, this alternative protein would be more expensive. So it was one of the learning moments. To me, I believe we are able to do it, right? And it's a better way. Other things are important to do for the climate, but the food supply, how critical it is, right, to us, and it's going to be forever there. We have to. So that's why I was convinced that we need to do it. We will make an impact. And another quick point is ReFed Group, right? The nonprofit for food waste reduction, refed.org, great organization. A lot of folks doing volunteer charity work in terms of recycling the food, repurpose. And also that organization, along with EPA, they have had study for many years. One of the things is the food waste management, basically the scope, right? And basically have the study concluded, indeed, right, the best way to manage food waste is to prevent it, right? If you think about everything, so far, a lot of folks focused on the last stage to prevent something from going to the landfill. And we know, of course, that have impact on the climate. But the biggest one needs to be looking at upstream. And that's how it's connected. And I'm a strong believer that we need to take this approach and that efficiency is important. And if we take this, that means very early on, we avoid all the labor and resource, right? And the food waste at the very end. And we should aim at least, right? Maybe getting rid of 90% or even more of those that are going to landfill. Right. That's a difference versus if you go later stage.
No, well said. I couldn't agree more. That's exactly right. It also seems to me that because food waste is not a new problem, but there's new technology to deal with food waste, right? Which
Yep.
enables, I think, the circle to be finally completed. And that technology is AI, right? Because
Yep.
they have manual. You can walk around with clipboards and stuff, but it doesn't work when the kitchen's busy. You're moving too fast. Clipboards are looking at ingredients, not finished product. There was no way to close the gap until I came along. And it seems to me there's going to be many such breakthroughs in a kitchen because temperature is a big deal, right? Meat temperature is a big deal. In your product, your company, your technology can measure the inside temperature of a steak, for instance. Can it solve lots of problems inside of a kitchen?
And then actually that temperature feature we also added because we heard from chef. And when we showcased them the first version of our portable AI scanner, and that's what the chef told us. And we since also learned a lot, right? Because with that, there is for the temperature, they definitely care about it, use the process, everything to ensure because it's safety, right? It's a
Right.
safety issue. And but then there is indeed the compliance. And when the inspector come in, they want to see the temperature log. And a lot of times they have to have someone doing that with a given cadence. It's so troublesome, right? Gloves and probes, and then so it's more disruptive. So that was one part. And then the one you started by talking about that food tracking. Just imagine, right? They know the best practice. Supposedly, a lot of places ask the staff to track the consumption. They know it. And the problem become is if you think of a given cafeteria, just a food station, you may be talking about 6 to 12 menu items. But for a given big organization, now you are talking about the multiple of those cafeterias. Every day they're dealing with then hundreds, right? At least hundreds of those menu items. This simply cannot manually track individual menu items in consumption. But that menu item consumption matters, right? Because when you talk about the production, then you have to know the combination along with the population, with the condition, weather. So that's why it becomes such a complex issue. Even today, they track limited ones, but then people cannot keep up what they do. They will do estimate. So that's where the problem comes.
That's where the problem comes in. It's also very inaccurate, right? So this really can change all of that at once. When you think of a great customer for this, it seems like it would be high volume, big kitchens, is cruise ships, universities, you have all these great examples, wonderful examples on your website of customers, people deploying the technology. Like where do you think you're going to have the biggest impact?
The interesting one is we started with, right, as a operator to be solution we feel in the end, if you talk about the impact, then it's the volume, right? It's
Right.
indeed the volume because that a small percentage make a big difference. So continuing our general applicability is really any group dining where they are going to involve, right, batch preparation of the food and need to feed
Mhm.
a lot of people. That is one. And so what you mentioned there is definitely all those are great customers, right? From the college all the way to corporate, right? Now the corporate dining. And there is the ones we are going to right now. We have some hotel resorts too, but think of the other hospitality, right? From let's see, senior living, basically healthcare, a lot of venue place as well. And then cruise is very interesting because now we are very active working with some top cruises because this is where not only it's such a concentrated volume because people when they're on board a week, everything, right? Everything happens on the boat. They have to eat. So that's why it's the volume is there. And the other thing is for those folks and be able to actually know how much what they are producing, they actually do a post waste processing, right? And they actually recycle and get the water back into the ocean and then just taking back the ones that already dry powder. That was something I learned, right? But it's a new thing. It's a required thing for the cruise.
Huh.
So that's why for those folks, it's very critical that they get the solution because it's a big part of their operation.
But have to did a cruise very recently, and I noticed it. People have a tendency to stuff their plates, and I don't know why. And I think it's because the buffets, there's no cash register at the end of them, right? It's all included. So I think people have a tendency to get wasteful. It must try. How do you do inventory when people just overpower and then just throw it away? Hope you can solve that.
Absolutely. Is also the interesting one is we mostly touched on right now we focus on the operation, the device, right? The AI mobile scanner support one of the configuration. We call it the post-consumer deployment. And actually, we have folks at, for example, Boston University. We have at another place, they are using it for the post-consumer. What it does is in that, in addition to all those scanning, right, it actually added also a feature where you can choose to leave a comment, a feedback. So you can say, okay, I like it, so this is bad. We believe we continue to improve that, give people both the feedback of how they are participating in right developing the good responsible eating habit, but also the second part of that info is critical for the operator is actually help them to feedback. One is of course the quality for them to discover something was not quite right, and the second one is portion. Those two with the data, even a sample, right? Let's say you have 10-20% of people scan, that's when you have the number, that's good enough sample for them to actually look at that data. They can do root cause, they can determine is either one of those, and it'll help them. So we definitely see that as a good way of helping, right? In that case you mentioned, or even the cruise, because you can get that feedback to the consumer, or in the school, it's that feedback to students.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it seems like the biggest innovation you built is not necessarily a scanner, but it seems like it's the creation of a new data layer on the food
Yes,
system.
yes.
And I'm curious, like, what are the headwinds you face as a growing company? Tell us a little bit about what that looks like, your growth projections, like what do things look like in 5 years, your vision?
And thank you so much. I'm glad that you mentioned the data layer, right? When I started looking at the solution, discussing more, this is actually indeed, right? Because we believe our starting point is a trusted AI data layer. And now it already gives the intelligence, right, for folks to improve their planning. But there is so much more to do this. Anything we can imagine for further automate and help the operation, this data is the beginning point. Anything, any reasoning you want to do, this data is critical to start talking about it. And then for us, in terms of headwind, I think one of the big thing is we know the food operation is a tough industry, the group of people working very hard, but at the same time, they're scattered, right? There are multiple of those decision makers that we need to approach both from chef to operations folks, but also if you go to certain environment, then you have the third party food service contractors, right? And they have an added layer. I think it takes time for those folks to realize that they need to act, they need to have a good solution. They all try different ways to do it. Sometimes they do a good job of improving that efficiency. Other times, probably less. So there is that level of education still, have more people to know, to see the case study data. So that's one. And then the second challenge for us being a startup, we are stranded right by the resources. So this is where we're constantly learning to see where we want to start outreaching to the right folk, right? Understand the problem in the trench and are willing to just give it a try. And that's all we ask. Is still we are learning. We're learning and getting the help very hard on this. In terms of where we see things, right? We believe the solution itself, the impact, now we have the data. If I was going to look at, we get over this the hurdle short term. If I look in 5 years, then we really are looking at, right? We should be looking at the revenues in the hundreds of millions, right? Because The space is there, the impact is there. It's all about us being able to execute and reach out to those folks. Then there is another big potential. We mentioned data layer. There are so many things we can build on top of this data layer that would have even bigger impact. Assuming, right, you all heard about people talking about robots, cooking robots. And interesting thing is a number of cooking robots vendors approached us, confined to us some of the challenges they have from prepping the ingredients to accurately measuring how much of each ingredient going into the cooking robots. And they are still manual, and that is still critical. That's how the saying, right? And there is huge potential. Of course, going up the supply chain, I really would love to see when we already have a lot of data that is manual level consumption data by region, right? By season, anything you can imagine. I was just imagining how much of that data would help to improve the forecasting, the marketing for US Foods and Cisco. Because today they rely on people who place the order, right? Says how much of what I need. And they already know that is not good enough, right? That's why we have this second harvest and all that the business pop up, because we have surplus and people can make a business out of the surplus. So
Right.
it's very interesting, right? I think that application impact is really unlimited.
Fascinating. Well, we're getting close to our time on the show. We always do like to extend. Folks that want to learn more can go to metafoodx.com and learn more about the work that Fengmin Gong's doing. But Fengmin, is there any question that we didn't cover here, or is there anything that you would like listeners to know? You're an accomplished founder. You've done it multiple times, and we think there's a huge value in that, people bringing solutions, but then also creating a valuable business. And so solution can really take hold. But just from your perspective, is there anything that you would like listeners or others to know that we may not have asked on today's show?
Appreciate that question. I would say because everyone is talking about the AI, I'll just make a quick comment. For us individuals, we know AI as a tool to do any research, right? Any topic, if you hit just a simple chat, it probably give you a 85 percentile expertise out there. It would offer you the things, right? You just need to ask the right question, keep asking because what you want. So with that criticality, looking at it, using it, I think it's upon every one of us, right? Because we know it's going to happen. It's how good we leverage it. That's from individual. But then general for AI, and because today we talked about this great topic about food service, and I have talked to other investors, observed, right? I feel this is where indeed AI getting into the physical environment, physical world, right? Food service, supply chain is one. And I have talked to the folks, started looking at also how AI is get blended into the workflow, for example, for the construction business. It's very interesting. AI is so powerful if it knows about that environment, what to do. Basically anything consistent tracking, number crunching, those are the things it's great at, but you just have to have a way to get this sensor, right? Get it to connect with our real world. That's where I believe there is going to be a lot of opportunity. And that's where the impact will be, right? Beyond just chat and the other things that we already put online. And that's what I want to share. I know we actually talk about the topic, but I just want to bring it up. I think it would be helpful.
No, I think it's so insightful. And even for us on the show, leveraging it, like Mike is actually our first AI bot that we've had on the show for What Do You Solve? And I created
Yeah.
him. And he's a
Yeah.
lot funnier than me. And he's really AI. Actually, one thing I just wanted to appreciate something about you that's just so insightful is that it's so helpful when somebody comes, like, because you've come from cybersecurity and the way that you're like, this is human to human, and some of the insights that you have, I think, are so profound. But to come in into another place and solve a problem because you have such a outside of the box way to think about it. It's so helpful. But I couldn't agree more with you on the AI. And I just really, we appreciate you coming on the show and being able to talk to you and learn from you, and wish you so much success. And we'll be checking back in on you in maybe a year's time or keeping in touch with you and seeing how Metafoodx is going. So thank you so much for being on the show today. Wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you both.